What's up, everybody? How you guys doing? So I'm Yancey from Kickstarter, and my presentation is not loaded. But I am going to talk today not so much about Kickstarter, but step back and talk about some of the bigger picture of what's happening right now. The presentation is still not working. How's it going today? Almost lunchtime. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so that's me. I'll get into a little bit about Kickstarter, but I'd like to talk, bigger picture. And I want to talk about what happens when society is dominated by money optimizing for more money. It's a big topic. And one I'd like to start by talking about commercial real estate. So, real estate prices continue to spike around the world, even with the 2008 crash. New York, London, all these places, you see this happen. A lot of us can't afford rent or can't afford to buy a place in a neighborhood where we've lived. But a really interesting way to think about it are through storefronts. So imagine a bakery, a tailor shop, a neighborhood business that has existed for a long time, and think about what happens to them as real estate prices increase, as investors treat land as an investment. And what happens is that a business that's been operating for 30 years, serving its community, suddenly sees its rents get jacked and has to think about its business in a different way, has to think about it by how much money can they generate per square foot per month to survive. But of course, this is not why they started their business. They started their business to serve a community. And eventually, this in all likelihood will force them to either move or die. And who moves in to take their place? Chains, banks. This is a map of all the New York bank branches in New York City. There are 1,800 banks in New York City. That's up 60% in the last decade. It's as if the ATM was never invented. That's not to mention the 400 Duane Reades. Duane Reade is a pharmacy. But around New York City, you just see chains everywhere, everywhere. And at the root of it is that small businesses can't afford to exist anymore because everyone is optimizing for money. And this is not unique to cities. This is something that happens in small towns and suburbs. Over the past 30 years, we've watched downtowns get hollowed out as businesses that have existed there for a long time are gutted by real estate developments like malls and strip malls, and once again, chains. And so I think we all have this sense that this is inevitable. This is a natural order of things. But I question whether that's really true. And ultimately, behind this, I see something that is having an impact across all of society, and that is a money monoculture. Just money trying to make money. And what this tends to do is it erases culture. It erases everything else. It reduces everything to a single bottom line. This is not good for a diversity of experience. This is not good for the little guy or the little girl. This is good for money. And so we can look across different parts of society and see quite similar things happening. The New York Times earlier this year had a story about how 158 families are funding a huge percentage of the United States presidential election. What better investment than a president? Or in music, where 80% of the concert business is owned by Ticketmaster, or where a world of many record labels is consolidated into just 3. Or this funny story where most pop songs are written by 4 Norwegian men who, to be honest, are really good songwriters and probably deserve it. But you see the same consolidation. This is hedge fund mentality with better branding. It's the same in film. Sequels, prequels, exploitation of existing IP, now in IMAX and 3D. In tech, it's a little bit different. There's not as much consolidation. It's still early days. Things are very wide open in many ways. But the same mentality is there. What's a venture capitalist? What is one of their first questions? What's your exit strategy? How are you going to make me money? And this focus on big valuations, big funding rounds, big burn rates, it all ends to that same place. It doesn't end to people trying to build something that lasts, something that works for people. They're trying to build something that will be wildly profitable. And I think this is a problem. When everyone is focused on this same concept of money maximization, you get charts that are up and to the right for all the wrong reasons. This is not a model that works for everybody. It's a model that works for itself. And for the people on the outside, and there are a lot of them, there are billions of them, this is terrible. This is terrible. It's dispiriting. There's no one speaking for you. You're fighting to be recognized. Your rights, you're fighting to be recognized, and it's extremely challenging. So all this is very depressing. What do you do about it? Can you do anything about it? It feels like we've been opted into this newsletter that we never signed up for, and, there's no unsubscribe button anywhere. So what are the choices? Do you opt in? Do you play the game? Maybe you get rich. Maybe you use your good fortune to give a lot of money away to charity, which is a very honorable thing to do. But ultimately, the same forces are being reinforced through something like that. Or do you opt out? Now, it's a lot of fun to think about opting out. It's very emotionally satisfying. To me, opting out is thinking, well, maybe I'll delete my Facebook account today. Or, maybe that Razr phone is still in my closet. Maybe I'll pull that out again. Or honey, let's try homesteading. But these are all pretty impractical. You're basically removing yourself from society. You're just a ghost to everyone. No one's really going to care about you anymore. Best case, you can write a viral Medium post about it when you come out of the woodwork again. So, what can you do? What are the options that are there? I think that there's a third option. I don't know exactly what it is, but I have a few ideas about what I think is important in getting there. And number one is don't sell out. Sometime in the past 10 years, selling out became not a problem. I grew up in the days of Kurt Cobain and corporate rock still sucks. And some point 10 years ago, it was like, we just stopped caring about that. We gave up on caring about that. We shouldn't do that. You shouldn't sell out your community to hit growth targets, and you shouldn't set our culture so you can get rich. We're all part of this. We're all part of this. You should focus on projects, on ideas that you think are meaningful, that you think are beneficial. And very importantly, you should try to build them out in such a way where they are sustainable. At Kickstarter, we have operated in the black for 5 years. We have a very simple business model. We charge 5% of what has been successfully funded. We don't spend a ton of money. We don't have a huge team. And as a result, we have a tremendous amount of freedom and independence. Having your own sustainability allows you to make these sorts of choices. That's very important. The other thing is to be idealistic. Don't succumb to just the inertia of the status quo, of industry standards. That's just a gradual sinking of all of us into just lower and lower standards. Really search for meaningful ways to do things. And we are very fortunate to have some great role models to look to. Just a few recent examples. Patagonia, wonderful company, one of the first benefit corporations. Their charter says that they will share proprietary information with their competitors if they believe it will help the environment. That's the right way to think about it. REI, another sportswear company, a co-op between management and employees, launched a campaign last week talking about how they're going to close their stores on Black Friday and are encouraging people to opt outside. So they're way ahead of us. In tech, there's Basecamp, Jason Fried's company. They build incredible software. They've been doing it for over a decade. They're not focused on massive growth rates. They're focused on building great products, having a great experience, and they've maintained their independence, and they are a voice of reason. Another great example is the Hype Machine. Great product built by a guy named Anthony Volodkin. Very small team, been doing it for over a decade. A great product and something that's very meaningful to a large community. Or someone from my teenage years could be a new hero, Fugazi. This is a punk band who for 30 years played $5 shows for all ages, ran their own record labels, selling CDs for $10, a small business that has lasted for more than 30 years. Maybe these guys could be our entrepreneurial heroes. That could be a startup founding team photo with the office dog and everything. Maybe we recontextualize Fugazi. So there are people out there that are doing this and that have done this. And in general, I think they follow a code. And that code is, don't try to be everything to everyone. Don't try to capture an entire market. Focus on exactly what's important to you, and just do that as well as you possibly can. Now, this isn't easy. There's a lot of pressure. The business and tech and startup zeitgeist has a tone of aggression. I mean, look at the cover of this magazine. Be paranoid, go to war, disrupt yourself. It's arguing really hard for you to be really anxious about what you do. It's a fear-based way of thinking. And this is something that I struggle with. I think a lot of us struggle with. I'm one of 3 co-founders of Kickstarter, but I became CEO about 2 years ago. And when I first stepped into that seat, I felt the weight of the company on my shoulders, and I also felt the noise of this kind of stuff. And it really made me question who I am. It made me ask, do I need to be this person to succeed? Is this what it takes to be successful, is to be more aggressive, to be more ruthless than the next guy? And that didn't sit right for me, but I really questioned whether that was the case. And I think a lot of people go through that. So I had a breakthrough moment when I read this book. And maybe there's a book for you that was a breakthrough moment, but this book spoke to me. This is written by a guy named Konosuke Matsushita. He's a Japanese businessman who ran an electrical company for about 60 years. And in his 80s, he wrote a series of books just explaining things he had learned through his career. And this one just has like these little 2-page sort of parables about, one day his head of sales came and told him about this problem, and they had to figure it out. And really what all these stories boil down to, the lessons that he shares and how he thought about business, was that it came down to acting with integrity always, a very moral, honest person. To be very creative in how you think. People would come and say, X is a problem for Y reason, but he would first ask, is X a problem, and is Y the reason? But to try to think more broader, to try to look at the matrix and be clear that you understood what was really happening there. He talks a lot about how a company needs to be a part of society and benefit society. He sees that as one of a company's core duties. And finally, he encourages collaboration. There's no single hero that's trying to do everything. It's a collaborative effort between everyone. But I read this book about 4 months after becoming CEO, and it really spoke to me. It spoke to me. It gave me a confidence that maybe there are other ways to think about this. And so going about this in this way is harder in a lot of ways. It's harder because every day you're being challenged by other voices suggesting that you're wrong. And even if you, at a good moment, feel confident, if you're sitting there in your Twitter feed looking at a bunch of stuff, it's hard. It's hard. I still experience a lot of anxiety around that. But in more important ways, it's easier. And it's easier because you're able to act with conviction. You get to be honest. If you think something, you can just say it. I'm here giving this talk, and sharing things that are not typical to share. But there's just a clarity that comes with this. You're not having to balance a bunch of different stakeholders. There's still moments when your principles are really challenged and you're put in situations you've never had to think about before. But there could be a real clarity in how you do that. And ultimately, if you follow this through, you get the ultimate product-market fit. And this is where your product, your community, and a broader society are all aligned around the goals of your business. This is what you should seek. This is happiness. This is health. This is the sort of thing that you can find. And so a good example of that is a CSA. This is community-supported agriculture. We have these in the US. I don't know how widely available they are, but they're just farms that a group of people just basically pledge to buy what the farm produces in a given year. It's very symbiotic, very simple, but everyone benefits from a scenario like that. With Kickstarter, we've tried to have a similar mentality. For example, that 5% of revenue that we received, we only get that if a project is successfully funded. So if backers and creators both win, they both got the desired outcome. And we tried to think that through our business in a lot of ways. And so a couple of months ago, we became a public benefit corporation. And this is a relatively new designation. Patagonia, I mentioned, had done this. But where you change your legal status to where you're actually obligated to think about society and your actions. You're not just focused on your own bottom line. You have to put equal weight on how others are affected by what you do. And so this was a really big moment for us. All our shareholders had to vote on it. You're still a for-profit company and all those things, but you're able to declare basically multiple bottom lines. And we wrote a charter when we did this. You could see at kickstarter.com/charter. And we lay out the dozen or so things that we are committed to doing. And starting in February 2017, every year we will publicly report on what happened with that. But for instance, we pledged to donate 5% of our annual profits to support arts and music education and to fight inequality. We pledged to not use any tax avoidance strategies in the operations of our company, to not lobby for policies in our economic best interest, but not in the best interest of artists, and so on. So we really thought about what does it mean for us to be the sort of company that we want to be. But this is a move that's available to any new entrepreneur. You know, right from the beginning, you can lock in that idealism that helped you start your company, that's motivating you now, and you can ensure that's a part of your organization for all time. You know, every giant company started as a small company once, but at some point they lose their soul. And we think this is a way to try to prevent that. So if I look across Kickstarter, you know, it's a huge diversity of projects. Some of these people might know what we've done with Benefit Corporation. I think far more have no idea and don't care. And that's totally fine. They may even disagree with it. That's totally fine. The whole idea is that there's the possibility for a diversity of opinion. It's not a monoculture. It's not a monoculture. It's a lot of people being able to do something for their own reasons. So one of the great benefits we see of Kickstarter is the fact that projects are funded just because people like them and think they're cool. We're not asking every project to meet the needs of an investor who's looking for an ROI. Is this going to be a good bet? Is this going to produce a good return for me? We don't think that culture or ideas should always have to be held to that standard. We think it's important that there be multiple standards that are possible. So internally, we have a mission and philosophy handbook. This is something written by our founder, our chair, my partner, Perry Chen. And the last page of that really cements how it is we think about the world. And this is it. We champion and celebrate the creation of art and culture. Fuck the monoculture. We got to push back on this. We got to push back on it. In the tech space especially, because this is wide open. This is wide open right now. We don't all have to sign up for that same newsletter. We can pick our different way. Half the things I said here may be wrong, and you may have a better way of doing them. Fantastic, go do it. Go do it. But I think that challenging just these defaults, this automatic way of thinking about things, this way of just money, trying to make more money, challenging that is imperative. And this is a core moment where I think it's possible for us to have a really meaningful impact. I think if we do that, I think this is what we could do. We can resist and we can thrive. And we can be a whole new class of organizations, of people, of artists and creators who are changing the way that we work. So, yeah, thank you. Take care.